When George Washington became president, he had important people near him. And I don't think most of us really appreciate the kind of people that were around George Washington, our first president. John Adams was his vice president, someone who had been influential in creating the Declaration of Independence, someone who was quite possibly at Lexington and Concord, someone who was just one of the driving forces for the American Revolution. He was the second president he became eventually the second president of the United States. His Secretary of State was Thomas Jefferson. Again, the man that wrote the Declaration of Independence, one who had helped secure France to help us in the American Revolutionary War, and someone who became the third president of the United States. In Congress, in the legislative branch, one of the main leaders there in Congress was a man named James Madison. He actually wrote George Washington's inaugural address and was a great advisor for him. He became the fifth president. James Monroe was the minister to France, and he became the sixth president, but he was there in the administration as well. The ambassador to Portugal was John Quincy Adams, and he became the seventh president. So I don't know of any other administration that had so many people that eventually became president in its workings there, right? Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of Treasury, and of course he was one of the people that were writing the Federalist Papers, one of the, again, movers and engines of the American Revolution. John Jay was another one of those who was working with the Federalist Papers, and he became the first Supreme Court Chief Justice. So again, all these people around him, you just think about what it must have been like in those early days to have so many people that were so not just intelligent, but wise in knowing how to form the government that we have. And one lesson that we could take from that is, well, wise, powerful men like George Washington surround themselves with powerful men. But we could also take this lesson that it takes a lot of different kinds of people to do well. I'm not sure that the American experiment would have gone very far if it hadn't been for all these people in their place doing their things that they were doing. Alexander Hamilton at the Secretary of Treasury, setting up banks and figuring out how to just work the American economy the way he did. People like Thomas Jefferson being there and working as Secretary of State with foreign powers. I mean, all of it was just the people that were needed at that time. And like most things in life, there are many moving parts in any kind of organization. We all, I think, understand that. Sometimes we're frustrated when the people that are actually doing the work at the bottom get forgotten for the people at the top who, they make all the money and we have to grunt and we have to just do all this. And there's maybe sometimes some truth to that, but we understand it takes everybody. We could criticize a CEO that makes millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, but, we've seen companies go bad and all those people lose their jobs because of a bad CEO. You need someone who's going to be in there to make the right decisions and to guide the company. On the other hand, we might assume, so on one hand, we might be frustrated that we're forgotten for all the things that we do. On the other hand, we might have this tendency to think, well, someone else will do it. So on one side, we think, well, we're doing more of the work and other people need to chip in. And on the other side, there are probably some areas in life where we're like, oh, somebody else will take care of that. That'll just get done. I want to show an illustration here in 2 Samuel 17 of everyone having some part in this story, a very important event that occurs in the life of David. It's often forgotten. It's not really thought of, but hopefully I can shed some light on it and show you the weight that happens here in this story, a fulcrum of David's life and administration. In 2 Samuel chapter 17, David is on the run from his son Absalom. His son Absalom has organized people around him, has marched on Jerusalem. David, wanting to spare the city, has left. He's gone east out of the city into the wilderness of Judea, and now Absalom is in the kingdom. And David's friend and advisor Ahithophel has betrayed him, but Hushai, his friend, is there sort of acting a little bit as a spoil, or at the very least a foil to Ahithophel's advice. And so we have kind of this tension mounting where Absalom is in the kingdom and he's got all the resources, he's got people behind him, and Hushai has advised him to wait in order to get all the people of Israel gathered and then all together go out and get David, kill him, and then Absalom's kingdom can be firmly established. Because right now it kind of feels like there's two kings. There needs to be kind of this, tension broken. And so while then Absalom, who accepted Hushai's idea, yes, let's wait and get everybody together rather than taking Ahithophel's idea to go out quickly and get him. While they're waiting, Hushai now needs to get word to David. Here's what happened. Here's what I said. Here's about how much time you have, and here's my advice to you. But Hushai can't just get on a horse and ride out there and be like, David, this is what I did, right? That isn't going to work. And so he needs to somehow get this message to David. How will he do this? And more importantly, what will happen to Jerusalem in an alternate universe? Of course, we understand the way that God was working and protecting, but all those things aside, if you were on the ground thinking, how is this going to work? How will this message get to David so that he can survive and fight and eventually return to Jerusalem? It's the story of how many people have a different part in what's happening. And I want you at the end of this message to be excited to serve God in some intentional way. I want you to commit to seeing what you can do to represent him in your life, family, community. And I'm going to ask you to take some actionable steps at the end of this message. So I want you to first notice the messengers. So Hushai, who's on Team David, has allies in the city. He has two men named Zadok and Abiathar. Now, Abiathar is the high priest. He's somehow related to Eli, but his father was the priest of Nob that was killed by Saul. Remember, David went into the city, asked for some bread, got bread and Goliath's sword. He left, and the priest there, Ahimelech, didn't know that David was on the outs with Saul. Saul came and said, "Why did you help him?" and killed everyone in the city except for Abiathar. Abiathar went on the run with David and was kind of a spiritual advisor for him. So there's Abiathar, and then there's another priest named Zadok. And Zadok and Abiathar are kind of co-serving as priests. They're the ones that when David was leaving the city, they came out with the Ark of the Covenant. Like, well, if you're leaving, we're going with you too. And remember, David said, not only take the Ark back, if God's pleased with me, he'll let me come back and see the Ark. He also said, it's actually good for you to be there because you can help me get messages back and forth. So that's where we're going to go with this story. So they're going to try to get a message to David. So looking at 2 Samuel 17, we've looked at everything so far. So look at verse 15. Then said Hushai unto Zadok and to Abiathar the priests, thus and thus did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus have I counseled. So the thus and thus, that's the plan. He doesn't say thus and thus. He's filling in the plan. The Bible's just kind of, for brevity's sake, saying what he said. Anyway, so now, verse 16. Therefore, send quickly and tell David, saying, lodge not this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily pass over, lest the king be swallowed up and all the people that are with him. All right, so here's what happened. Here's what you should do. Get over the river. Get over the plains. Don't be in the plains of the wilderness, but pass over the river Jordan. Find some advantageous place where you can camp and make Absalom come to you and fight on your own terms. But he is coming for you. That's the message that needs to get out. Now, the problem is that here is Abiathar and Zadok, and they're not only serving in the priest, but they're not going to be able to go without being detected. So what they do is they get a message to David in another way. So in verse 17, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed by Enrogel, for they might not be seen to come into the city. Again, Absalom's probably a bit paranoid. He knows that David still has friends around, and so Jonathan and Ahimaaz, their sons, are staying outside of the city in a place called Enrogel. It's a spring out there just outside of Jerusalem, just northeast of Jerusalem, I believe. And they're outside, so all we have to do then is get the message from inside the city to outside the city so that they can take it and run with it to David and tell him, this is the way this is going to go. They're going to bring some kind of message. And so what they do is they get a young woman. Now, let me just stop and say, we don't use the word wench anymore. Okay? We don't. And so for us, that term has become something very different than it was back in the 17th century. Okay? So don't get hung up on this word. It just means a young female servant. It could be a young female slave. But someone who it wouldn't have been suspicious for her to go out of the city to a spring. What is she going to do there? Probably get water. Right? So here, now imagine the priest coming in and saying, listen, Rachel, whatever her name is, I've got a job for you. I need you to go, and my son and his son are out there at the spring. We need you to go take this message. Maybe it was written, I don't know. Maybe it was just, they're going to tell her, do you understand what we're asking? Okay. She's got her bucket and she's okay. I'm going to go tell them. And then she goes out there to the well, and maybe there's people around, and she's getting her water. Maybe she's nervous. I'm picturing this little girl, and these two guys are there, and they're getting some water, and she brings it maybe when there's no one around, and she says, here's what your dad says to tell you. Hushai did this, and Ahithophel says this, and you need to run fast. And they get the message, and now they're ready to go. So it says in verse number 17, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed by and Rogel, for they might not be seen to come into the city. And a wench went and told them, and they went and told King David. So now they're going to be off. Here we go, right? She's pretending to get water. She's just giving this message so that David can know. All these moving little parts. You don't know anything about this little girl. You don't know very much about Jonathan and Ahimaaz, except that they were used to get the message to David. Communication is so important. We have so many ways to communicate anymore. What do you need for communication? Well, I was thinking about this, and you need three things. You need the text, you need the transmission, and you need a target. So the text is, what should I say? Well, they were given the message by Hushai. Here's what you say. Don't just say, David, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? Like, there's a message they have to go give. So there's the text. And we have a message to give as well. It's called the gospel, or the good news. Now, the very term good news means it's something that should be shared. The good message, the good, the thing that should be shared with others. Because there's all kinds of stuff that you know that's good, but you don't need to tell us. You don't need to tell other people. But the word news or message implies that it needs to get out there. That's what the gospel is. When we see on the back, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel, that is saying, here's the message to take, the good news. And you say, well, I don't know how to give the gospel. And can I say, not pridefully at all, but you're probably not going to give the gospel as well as I do. That's not a pride thing. I've just had a lot of practice. I was an evangelism minor, so I learned how to give the gospel. I've done a lot of listening to people like Ray Comfort and John Van Gelderen, and I've learned how to give the gospel because that's my life. So I get that you're maybe not going to do it as well as someone like me could do it. That also does not matter at all. Because what you can tell, the good news that you can tell, is what happened to you. Your story is so much more important than getting every little part right. And I'm not saying don't give the gospel unless you get every part right. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying you don't have to tell everything that there is to know about the Bible. You don't have to be, I know that sometimes you're afraid that they're going to ask you, well, what does Exodus 34:12 mean? And you're like, I don't even know there was 34 chapters in Exodus. You don't have to know any of that. Just tell what you know. And when someone asks a question, you'd be like, that's probably a good question. We could ask my pastor, but I'm just talking to you about what happened to me, what Jesus did for me. That's the good news. That's the message. That's the text that needs to go out. Then we have the transmission. Well, how do I tell them? Now, it's never been easier to communicate with people. Isn't it an amazing thing how much communication can happen today? You can see when it's happening, stuff that's going on the other side of the world. We're just living in an amazing time. It's honestly a terrifying time in a lot of ways. I'm so glad Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat weren't around when I was in high school. You kids that are in the public school especially, you have all my pity because it must be very, very hard to be a teenager with so much information. Something gets out there and everybody knows about it in a matter of seconds. And that's got to be very hard. That's the bad part of communication, but the good part is that you can go and tell people, you can tell lots of people the message of salvation for free. You can text, you can email, you can make a video. You don't even need a stamp. I heard stamps are going up 5 cents. They're going to be 78 cents in July. Can you believe that? Right? You don't even need a stamp. You can just tell the gospel. You can talk to people. You can send a text. You can be your own evangelist without ever leaving your chair, just with your phone. But for me, I always try to, wherever I am, try to strike up a casual conversation with someone at Walmart, someone at the store, someone at a restaurant. I'm just trying to at least strike up some kind of casual conversation so that I can somehow give the gospel. And one of the things you can do is to give a little gospel tract. All right, I don't really have time to talk to this person. They're not maybe really interested in having a conversation, but I can at least give them the message, the text. And I can do that by the transmission or the means of doing it by giving them a tract. Now the target, right? So any communication needs text, the message, you need the means, the transmission, and then also the target. So who needs to hear? In this case, it's David, right? The woman isn't just saying, tell everybody. No, there's one person that needs to know this message of what's going to happen, and that's David. So they're going to go. In our case, it's anyone who needs to hear the gospel. And there are lots of people that need to hear the gospel. Can we stop assuming, I'm sure they've heard it somewhere. I'm sure that there is other means for them to hear it. Yeah, there is. There's Christian radio. There's all kinds of resources. We sell Christian books at Walmart. They can go and get a Bible if they want. Here's the thing. It doesn't mean as much unless it comes from you, someone who cares about them, someone who can tailor that message in a way that matters. So the message is important, but the messenger is important, and the target is important. The target is who needs to hear. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 8 and 9, Paul commends the Thessalonians because when they got saved, everybody found out too. He says this, For from you sounded out the word of the Lord, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but also in every place your faith to Godward is spread abroad, so that we need not speak anything. For they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had unto you, and how ye turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God. They were so on fire that everybody in the whole region knew something special has happened at Thessalonica. So what motivated them? What motivated Jonathan and Nehemiah to go? Well, I think mostly it was the well-being of their kingdom and their well-being of their king. So let me ask you, do you care enough to be the messenger to a dying world? Every day people are going into eternity. And you can reach people that no one else can. And maybe you can't reach everybody, but you can reach somebody. You can do something. Do you care enough to be a messenger? Listen, if David doesn't hear this message, he's going to be in real trouble. If he doesn't hear that he needs to move his company and his army across the river, he's going to be in real trouble. He's going to face a judgment. And the same thing is true for the people that are around us as well. There's a day coming where they will give an account to God for what they have done with their lives, what they've said, how they have related to God. And if not through Jesus Christ, then only they have their own sins as a veneer between them and God. And it's important for us. So can I offer you a challenge? So back on the back, Terry keeps these well-stocked, the tract rack back there. Right by my office, there's the big window, and then right off to the left. Maybe you've never even noticed it, but can I encourage you to notice it? These are gospel tracts. We have some that have little cartoons on them, some that are in booklet form. I like to give God's Bridge, but this one is called I've Got My Own Religion. And so for someone you're talking to and they say, I'm not really interested, I've got my own religion, you're like, actually, I have a little thing. I just wondered if you would read this. And it would be as simple as this, to be able to, you're at a restaurant, you just leave it with a generous tip. You're at the gas station, you're at Holiday, you're checking out, and there's not a long line of people behind you, so you can say, hey, I wonder if when you get a minute, when you're on a break or something, could you read this? Someone's out on their smoke break, and you know what people do on their smoke break? They're kind of wishing that there was something else to do. They wish that there was someone else with them, or that there's something to read. And I've gone up to people and just be like, hey, while you're taking your break, you want to read this? And most people, let's say 95% of people are like, thanks. And 4.5% of people are like, okay. And I've had very few people that are like, no thanks. But at least they say thanks. Like, this is a very, very easy thing to do. Can I give you a challenge? Here's the challenge. I would love for everyone in this church to give out 10 tracts this summer. It's 100 days, one every 10 days. Give out 10 tracts. Challenge yourself. Say, I'm going to give this out. Now, again, be wise about it. I know that you have all these things in your head. Oh, no, just give out 10 tracts this summer. A neighbor, someone that you know, someone that you don't know, 10 of them this summer. Now, one of the best places to do that is at the fair. When we have mid-July, the county fair, you could knock out 10 in an hour if you want. You just stand there and, I've gotten my 10. I think that's a wonderful thing. Or you can come door to door with us this summer. In a couple weeks here, we're going to start that up on Wednesdays. And basically, we go knock on someone's door. Hey, we're just inviting people to church. And you just hand it to them. And if they say, oh, I've got my church, you can say, oh, that's great, thank you. Or you can say, oh, man, that's great, and I know all the pastors in town, so I say, oh, Pastor so-and-so, and I see if they really go to that church or if they're just trying to blow me off, whatever, But just try to strike up a conversation. But that would be a really, real easy way to do that, okay? You don't have to give out this one. You can give out any of them, but there's a bunch out there. And maybe just once a week, you're like, I'm going to try to give out one a week. 10 weeks a summer, I can do one a week. Something like that. Just let me challenge you, 10 tracts this summer, because you can be a messenger. The message is important. The message is important, and you're important to give the message as well. So then now let's look at the protectors. So notice in verse number 18, nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom. In the Hebrew, Jeb, this is a snitch. He's a snitch. No, it's not really in the Hebrew. That's just what we call him. He snitches, right? He sees, I saw what happened, and went and told Absalom. So now Absalom has to do something about it because Jonathan and Ahimaaz are going to go and tell David he can't let any of these messages get out. It could be catastrophic for him. In fact, it is. But they went, both of them, away quickly and came to a man's house in Bahurim, which had a well in his court, whither they went down. And again, you just kind of read through your Bible and you just kind of read through this, but imagine these two young men, and they've got to get a message, and now they know that Absalom's after them. And so they go into this house, and there's a house here, and they have a courtyard in the middle. So they have, maybe the dad's house is here, and the sons have houses all around, and in the middle there's this courtyard. And so they say, we need a place to hide. Absalom and his men are coming after us. And so they say, quick, 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 down the well. And so they go down into this well, and who knows how deep it was, but who knows how they held onto the sides. Maybe they had a rope. I don't know, but they're down there in this well. And it says here in verse number 19, the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and spread ground corn thereon, and the thing was not known. So this is something I didn't realize what happened, but they would sometimes, water is a big deal in Israel and in arid places. So sometimes what they would do, so they didn't let other people know that they had a well, so that you wouldn't come asking them, they would kind of just put some kind of cover over it, and then they would have things over it there. So this woman puts this cover on this well, and maybe puts a cloth or a tent or something over it, and then puts corn on it to make it look like she's sifting out the corn, so that you wouldn't even know a well was there. So all of a sudden, Absalom's soldiers come in, and they're looking for these two young men, these two spies. And they're down there in the well, listening to all of this. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman to the house, they said, where is Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said unto them, they be gone over the brook of water. And when they had sought and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. And it came to pass after they were departed that they came up out of the well and went and told King David and said unto David, arise and pass quickly over the water, for thus hath Ahithophel counseled against you. Then David arose and all the people that were with him, and they passed over Jordan. By the morning light, there lacked not one of them that was not gone over Jordan. So it works. She makes up a story. She has protection. She makes up a story, and then they're eventually gone. She's this wonderful protector, but the story doesn't happen. David doesn't find out without this woman's protection, without this woman's help. Get down in the well. Cover it up. put the corn over it. Make it so that no one knows what's going on. And Absalom's servants, they're maybe thinking, well, we got to get going. We got to find them. They look, and there's corn everywhere. They're not here. They're not going to search every house. And so they just go. There are so many threats that people are facing today, and they need help. There are a lot of people that are really desperately needy. And it's real easy for us to kind of put our blinders on and not see the needs that are out there. But there are people that need help. They need our protection. We need to help parents who are facing bad advice and fatigue and unrealistic expectations. They need help. They need some accountability. Christians are facing temptations at alarming rates. There is more to tempt us today just in private than there ever has been. And I understand, like, in your own mind, yes, that's private, but I'm saying, like, there are so many things that Christians are just being drawn to in our world. And they need accountability. They need advice. They need encouragement. They need warning. They need some partners who will walk with them through this as protectors. If you care about your brothers and sisters in Christ, if we care about their well-being, then we would want to be a protector for them. Our culture and society is becoming more secular, and yet the trends are telling us that young people are hungry. They're hungry for something authentic. They're hungry for something supernatural. It's crazy to me how many young people are talking about signs. I thought that was totally a 70s thing. You know, what's your sign? Oh, you're an Aries. I'm a Gemini. I don't even know if that's one of them. Gemini, you know, that's all these things. And like all these, the horoscopes and trying to tap into something that is out there. I talked with a nurse the other day who said that she went to see someone that she called a witch. You know, like we're just looking for something that's supernatural. People are hungry, and yet they're going to all the wrong things. And if they're not doing it in the right way, if they're going to the wrong things, they could really be hurt. And we as Christians need to be able to say, we want to be a part of that protection for you. We want to protect you from the world and from culture and society that's just eating people up. We believe that Christ has the answer. We believe that Christ is the answer to the problems of the world today. We believe that he works through his church in communities. Churches used to tie people together. It used to be that if you were rich, if you were poor, everybody went to church and you sat next to the people that were, very different from you, but that was the one common place, the one place of community. We were all together is in a church. And churches used to be the place that lifted up the needy before social programs got so far away from what anything that our churches could do for people. Christ intended his church to make a difference. I recently read in Acts chapter 17 where Paul goes into Thessalonica, and the people that were there recognized them and said, "These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also." You know what that means? That Christianity is supposed to make a difference. There's supposed to be something that makes a difference when Christians come to town. And part of this was Paul's outlook. He said this in Galatians 2, verses 9 and 10. And he's talking about a time when he was at a certain place. And he says, when James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen, and they unto the circumcision. And so Peter and James and John came together, and they saw Paul, and they said, okay, we're going to focus on the Jewish people, the circumcision, and you go to the heathen or the Gentiles. And then it says this, only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I also was forward to do. So it wasn't just given the gospel, they were also supposed to make an impact and a difference in the communities in which they went, even with the poor. So will the church stand up? How different could things be in America today if churches had stood up and said, we're going to be the protectors. We're going to be the major influencers in our community. What if people, instead of looking on their phones at people on Instagram, were looking to people in their church? What if we had continued that culture of, I know where to look for the answers. I know where to look for the help in my life, the protectors. That's who the church ought to be. Now, what motivated her in Bahurim to do this? Well, I don't know exactly. Probably she knew that David was gone. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, Shimei was from Bahurim. Remember Shimei? Shimei was the guy that went out there and he saw that David was leaving, and so he started throwing dust and rocks at him and cursing him. And he was of the house of Saul. Probably this town has something to do with Saul, or at least the tribe of Benjamin. And so people knew that David was gone. And yet, rather than turning these young men in, she was a protector. Now, again, it's hard because we look at national news and we say, our country is in a mess. And we look at local news and we're like, whoa, our state's in a mess. That's even worse, right? I don't know anything about that. I'm not planning on changing the country. I'm not planning on changing Minnesota. When we pray on Wednesday nights for revival, I'm praying for revival in our area. Because I can't do anything about there, but I can do something about where God's put me here. And you can do something about where God's put you here. Can I encourage you to join a local group and be a light for Christ here? A couple weeks ago, I asked you to evaluate your use of your time. I don't know how many of you did that. I don't know how many of you took a piece of paper and said, okay, how am I using my time? And I don't know how many of you, maybe you didn't do it, but at least you've been thinking about, okay, I got 168 a week. Some of that's sleep, some of that's eating, some of that for some of you is work, but what's left over? Do you have time to get involved in the community, to be influence? What did Jesus say? Salt and light in your community. I asked you to look at that and see how much time spent and see if there was any more time that could be spent. Now, I think that the number one place you can volunteer is the church, but can I be real honest? There's not a lot that we need volunteering for here. There's the grass and the grounds, and I appreciate people that have stood up for that, but there's not a whole lot. But there is a way that you see, I don't want to spend a lot of time just making this facility better and nicer. I appreciate everyone who's done that, but I'm saying there's more to do. The church is not about equipping the building, it's about equipping people. Right? My job as a pastor is not to make programs so that we can go out. It's to equip you as a believer just in your day-to-day life to go out. So I'm trying to encourage you to get somehow involved outside the four walls of this church, outside the four walls of your house, your home, and to go into the community. And I know that many of you, that's a very scary thing because you think, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm introverted. I don't even really like large crowds of people, and I understand all of that. But I'm asking you, for the gospel's sake, can you do something to get involved in their community? I've been talking with, over the last few months, different people in our community to find out what are the needs. I talked to the assistant elementary school principal, wonderful Christian lady. And I said, is there anything that our church can do? And she said, well, some kids go to release time to other churches, confirmation classes or whatever, but some don't. Some are just there in the classroom. And she said the first grade, it would be great if some people would come in and just be reading buddies for them. Someone who could come in and just kind of read to them and hang out with them. And they're moving it next year. The release time is going to be not just first thing on Wednesday morning, it's going to be in the afternoon. So do you have some time on a Wednesday afternoon? You could go and volunteer and be at the school and just kind of be a friendly Christian face in the public school. There are other areas, I'm sure, but that's just a foot in the door. There's an organization in town here called Living at Home. They're actually now located at the old orthodontics place, the place with the big polar bear out front. Maybe you go that way toward the roundabout, but it's called Living at Home. And they are helping mostly vulnerable people that the church should very much care about. On their website, they say this: we are frequently looking for people who love to do handyman work or housekeeping, play cards, visit with seniors in their homes, or take someone to the grocery store or to a medical appointment. It takes very little effort to make a big difference in someone else's life. I was talking with someone recently who was mentioning, I don't know how to say this without making it pretty obvious, but there's someone in our that we are associated with that had someone going to help them do certain things. And the person, I know both of these people, okay? And the person that was going to help them do these things, the person that was volunteering their time, is someone that I know is not a believer in Christ. In fact, has been very, in some ways, antagonistic when I've gone to talk to them about the gospel. And yet here they are helping someone that we know, that we care about, to do some pretty basic tasks. And I thought to myself, it should be someone in our church doing that, not someone who's an unbeliever, someone who's an atheist. It should be someone like us doing something like that. The library is looking for board members. The library in town here, they have, I think it's a 3-year term or something like that, but they need Christians. I have been asked by at least 2 different people, can you please find anyone in your church who'd be willing to serve on the library board? You say, well, that doesn't sound very interesting. No, maybe not. But you know, if we don't do something, then we really don't have much of a leg to stand on when all of a sudden they bring in books that we don't like. And maybe you're not in there very often, but maybe you know what kind of books I'm talking about. You know, I can't promise that you have any kind of influence that way, but here, Christian, can we do something? Can you get on a library board to help maybe shape the way that goes? And when maybe somebody comes in with some idea about having drag queens read stories to kids in a library, you can be like, no, we're not going to do that. You know what it takes? It takes Christians to do that. You say, well, Pastor, why don't you do that? I'm on the board for community ed. I'm a chaplain. I'm doing a lot of things in our community because I feel like it's important to do those things. And it's not a huge time commitment. Community ed is like an hour every other month and a luncheon once a year. We take summers off. But it's something where I'm in the community. I'm not asking for you to give all of your free time to community events and run here and run there. I'm asking, can you join something in the community to be an influence, a Christian influence, to protect our community and our society? The DAC, I talked to Lacey over at the DAC. If you don't know where that is, it's right across the library, kind of in between the library and the bank, Citizens Bank. And Lacey said they're looking for people who can come and just hang out with people with developmental disabilities. If you can sing, that would be great. If you can come and play cards with them, sweet people who just would love to have some interaction other than they come to the DAC, same people every day, they go home to their group home. They come back and just something else. Can you be an influence, a difference maker to them? There are other groups in the area. There's the Family Safety Network, always looking for help. And there are ways where you can get involved. Can I challenge you to join some local group and be a light for Christ here? I'm not saying church. I'm not outside of church, something that's doesn't have anything to do with religion, something that has to do with our community and the way forward. Can I challenge you over the summer to consider that and join something so that you can be a part of something? I know some of you are, but there are some vulnerable that we can help, and we ought to want to. The final person I see here is the givers. So look at verse 22. David arose, all the people that were with him, they passed over Jordan. By the morning light, there lacked not one of them that was not gone over Jordan. Verse 24, David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom passed over Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. So he just got over Jordan just in time, and then Absalom was there as well. He passed over Jordan. Now it's all set for what we're going to talk about next week, this civil war. Right in the middle, and I skipped over, is verse number 23. Verse number 23, Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed. He knew that this was going to end badly and disastrously for Absalom, so he went home and hung himself. That's the end of Ahithophel. But now David starts to prepare for war. And so we see in verses 25 and 26, Absalom made Amasa captain of the host instead of Joab, which Amasa was a man's son, whose name was Ithra the Israelite, and that went to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister to Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So this Amasa, he shows up later. He's actually Joab's cousin, David's nephew, his older sister's son. He's now the captain of Absalom's army. In verse 26, so Israel and Absalom pitched in the land of Gilead and were now ready. But they're still in the wilderness. They still have needs. We read earlier that Ziba, the guy that was helping Mephibosheth, came and brought provisions on it in his own name, kind of horning in for something, like, I got to get something here. But those provisions, I'm guessing, are now gone. So in the meantime, 3 men come with provisions. Verse 27, it came to pass, I'll read it. It came to pass when David was come to Mahanaim that Shobi, the son of Nahash of Rabbah, the children of Ammon, and Maker, the son of Amiel of Lodabar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite of Rogelim, brought beds and basins and earthen vessels, and wheat and barley and flour, and parched corn and beans and lentils and parched pulse, and honey and butter and sheep and cheese of kine for David and for the people that were with him to eat. For they said, the people is hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Nobody asked them. They just showed up with lots and lots of, you're now thinking about this and thinking, it kind of makes me hungry thinking about all this stuff that they brought. But it was enough to help feed the people and get them ready for this war. These men were not going to fight. They were not the messengers. They weren't protectors. They were givers. They were people that were going to help in this effort in this way. They gave of their own personal store in order to meet the needs of David. Christians have always been known to be generous. Christians are statistically, I think, the most generous people when it comes to giving of themselves. And why is that? I thought about this. Why is it that Christians are this way? One is they see everything they have has been bought by Christ. Like when I got saved, he bought me, he bought everything. Everything I have is his. It's all his. 2, they trust the Lord to meet the needs, and they depend on him to make it up. So I can give knowing that if I give and I don't have, God will make that up. He's in charge. He'll make sure that I have what I need. They also, 3, see themselves as stewards. I want to be faithful with that which God has entrusted to me. It's not mine, it's his. I'm just moving his things around, whatever that is. And 4th, I think they believe that they can do good and make a difference with their resources. We believe that we're spiritual and that we're only on this earth for a little time. We believe that we can use the things that we have as a means to a spiritual end and not just to live to get those physical ends. It's a totally different way of thinking than the world. Notice something in verse number 27 about these men. The first one is a guy named Barzillai. Well, the last one actually is a guy named Barzillai the Gileadite of Rogelim. Later on in chapter 19, verse 32, he's going to, David's going, hey, you want to come to Jerusalem with me? And Barzillai says essentially this, I'm 80 years old. I can't really hear that well. Can't taste food. It sounds like a wonderful thing, but I think I'll just die here. He's just pictured this kind of old grizzled guy, and he's like, no thanks. That sounds like a lot of work. It was enough for me to bring everything here. I'm a giver. He's not in it for that, right? He's near the end of his life, but he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to do something to help David. I think people near the end of their life start to think about their legacy. How am I going to be remembered? Is there anything I can do with what I have that's going to make an actual difference? I suspect that Barzillai had done this his whole life, but now he's 80, and it would have been real easy to stay home and not come to David with all this provision. But he's thinking about what he can do to give. And I wonder if as you get older, you start to think about the way you're going to be remembered. Not in a trust sort of way, but just even in our church sort of way. The next guy here is Maker, the son of Amiel of Lodabar. And if that name sounds familiar, trust me, Pastor, it doesn't. But if it does, you would understand that this is the guy that was taking care of Mephibosheth. Remember, David, back in chapter 6, said, is there anybody left of Saul's house that I could show kindness to? And somebody says, well, actually, Mephibosheth, he's lame on both his feet, but he's been staying with this Maker, the son of Amiel of Lodabar. And he was taking care of Mephibosheth on his own. Now, that could have been a very, very dangerous thing for him because he's taking care of Saul's kids. And if David had been of a different character, that would have been probably certain death, treason for him. And yet he did that. And now here he is. And now he wants to help the king. He is loyal to God's choice for him. Whoever God chooses, that's who I'll be loyal to. That's who this Maker guy is. And the first guy, which is the last guy I'm mentioning, is a guy named Shobi. And you say, okay, what does that have to do with anything? Well, I don't know. The name Shobi, if that means anything. But notice it says the son of Nahash of Rabbah of the children of Ammon. Now again, you're thinking, who is this Nahash? Well, Nahash was the king that invaded in Saul's day and said, hey, you can keep your city as long as you pluck out your eyes. And Saul rallies all the people together, and they have a great victory. Nahash dies. Hanan, his son, rules, and David sends messengers to Hanan, and Hanan says, I don't think that's really what's going on. Remember, cuts off half their beard and shaves off their garments, so they have to go away half naked, and all that. That's Hanan. That's Shobi's brother. Right? They're both now here. This guy is an Ammonite. He's the king's son. He's a sworn enemy of David, and David completely humiliated his brother Hanan. And yet here he is helping. And I just say, you don't have to agree for everything that we're doing here. You don't have to perfectly align with everything. There are probably things where you'd be like, well, I do that differently, and that's fine. Okay? I'm willing to take some suggestions, but I get it, that not everything has to be perfect, and not probably everything was perfect for Shobi and David, but here he is giving to help as well. So let me offer you a challenge again. I am not asking for more than God wants you to give, okay? And quite honestly, we are doing just fine as a church where I'm not asking you for more money. I'm not asking you for that, okay? But I will say this, missions giving has been wonderful. We actually just a few weeks ago raised the level of support that we were giving to all of our missionaries across the board. Praise God and thank you. That's a wonderful thing to be able to do. You know that there are more missionaries out there than we could ever support. And there are more needs than we could ever meet. So let me just encourage you, if you're not giving to missions, to give to missions, to consider that, to make that a special designation. And we'd like to give a love offering to the Mansells next week. You can designate that. Next week, it'll be anything that goes on the plate will go for them and Jocelyn. And so looking forward to that. But I'm just saying, as a regular part of what you do, give to missions. But now talking about Park Rapids, I recently went into social services and talked to a man there who works there and said, listen, is there anything that our church can do? Maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't, that about 1.5 years ago, we started providing backpacks for the social services. And what was in that was some toiletries and things that when a child is taken out of their home because of a dangerous situation, they don't have anything, then they would have something that was they could take with them, that could be theirs. And it would have different things in it. And we provided those. And they haven't used very many of those, but they have some, and we're on standby. But I thought, that was good, but it wasn't quite enough. So I went to talk to somebody, and I said, is there anything we can do? And one of the things he mentioned, he says, every once in a while, a social worker will just have a foster kid that's really struggling, and they need someone to go talk to. He's like, and you would think that with taxes being the way they are, he's honest, that we would have all kinds of money for that kind of thing, taking these kids out for a drink or for some fries or a burger or something. You'd think that we would have all the money for that, but we really don't. He's like, often that comes out of our pocket. He said, so that would be a way you guys could help maybe. And so just this week, I took them a whole stack of some gift cards to restaurants in the area. And just $10 gift cards, whatever, and said, and I bought them from the church, but I said, here's something that hopefully will be used to help your social workers. And I didn't put our name on it or anything. I just said, but you know that we care about you and we're trying to help. And I wonder if maybe if the Lord would lead you to, you're at Burger King next time you're there, right? And your bill comes to, I don't even know, I got one burger at $17, whatever it is, what a crazy amount it is. And I know that everything's going up. But maybe you just say, hey, can I also get just a $10 gift card as well? And when the plate comes by, you can just put that in there and say, this is something I want to do, I want to give. And maybe you say, well, I don't like McDonald's or Burger King. Okay, fine. You can go to Dairy Queen, you can go to A&W, you can go to Walmart, honestly, and just get something that social services can use to help the foster kids in the area, just to say, hey, First Baptist Church cares about people, and we want to give this. Again, please don't hear me trying to put guilt on you. I want you to just do some serious evaluating of what you can do to make a difference. because there are needs. David was in need. He needed people to be messengers. He needed people to be protectors, not even of him, but of the people that were helping him. He needed people to be givers. And all of this is coming together because everyone has a part. It might be small. It might be bigger. You might get recognition in this life. It might have to wait till the judgment seat of Christ when you hear well done. But everyone has a part. Everyone has something you can do. And I want you to spend some time, even this week, saying, Lord, what more can I do? And if maybe the Lord will say nothing, but I'm going to guess that there's more that all of us can do. Everyone has a part. Everyone has something that we can do to work in our community to make the gospel of Jesus Christ known and to work his work in this world. Our King doesn't need us like David does, but it's a chance to be a part of his working. Everyone has a part to play. Do you know what yours is? I'm not asking again because I have a need, because I need something. I have my ministry and I know what I'm doing. But God, I believe, wants to grow you. He wants to bless you through your ministry. When David goes back, we'll see this later, he will reward those people who helped him. He will, when he comes back into his kingdom, he will reward those who did good for him. And there's coming a day when the king comes back into his kingdom, he's going to reward you as well. Are you aware of that? Are you ready for that day? Because everyone has a part.